Hi, and welcome everybody to Project Rebrand. We are happy that you guys have all joined us today, and we look forward to speaking to you about rebranding, your rebranding needs, and why it's important to take rebranding into consideration. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box, and we will get to them as we go through our presentation. We want our presentation to be very interactive today, so please do feel free to type in your questions. And if we do not get to your questions in our webinar today, we will respond via email and answer as many questions as we can. I would like to introduce our speakers today. We have Anne Yoder, the Director of Insights, and we have Lily Obior, Director of Design and User Experience. And I'm going to hand it off to Anne now to tell you a little bit more about Balanced Interactive and what we do. Anne? Okay, well, actually, there might be some technical difficulties going on with Anne. She's calling in today, so let me hand it over to Lily, and we can get started.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lily Fujinaga Obioha, and I am the Director of Design and User Experience at Balanced Interactive. That pretty much means that I am the champion for all front-end related issues. Things such as visual design, information architecture, content strategy, and front-end development is what I do at Balanced Interactive. My career started off as a graphic designer. I have worked on many graphic design and interactive projects, including branding projects. So today we want to talk about three things: why organizations are rebranding. I want to go over with some case studies and close off the presentation with best practices on reinvention. All right, so let's start on why organizations are rebranding. And I want to start off this presentation by saying that I will be talking mostly about the visual aspect of rebranding, particularly on logo design, and not so much on the marketing strategy side. So there are two reasons why an organization will be rebranding. The first reason would be the proactive rebranding, which basically means that a rebranding will occur to seize some sort of an opportunity. The first reasoning will be the predictive growth. This happens when an organization needs some sort of consistency throughout their brand unity and across their businesses. The second example, new line of business or marketing, this is when a company's service or a product is growing. A good example for that would be Apple. Apple, back in the 1980s, when they started their business, their product, obviously everybody knows this, was selling personal computers. Obviously, the product line has expanded. They are in the music industry, they are in the mobile, the tablet industry, etc. So currently, Apple Computers dropped their name computers from their company name, and now they are called Apple. The third reasoning, new audience, this is when a company wants to appeal to new audiences. One example would be McDonald's. Now, I have a few children in my household, and they refer McDonald's as Mickey D's. So that will be one reasoning for a new audience rebranding effort. The other rebranding effort would be relevancy. When a company realizes that the brand is losing relevancy, they would need some rebranding. And a good example would be Radio Shack. Radio Shack in the early 90s had a lot of different stores. Each of these stores sold items that would connect, for example, CD players, disc players, radios, etc. And obviously those products don't exist, or they don't exist that much anymore. So back in 2009, Radio Shack decided to rebrand itself as The Shack. The second reasoning is the reactive rebranding. And this means basically that the branding occurs because of some sort of an event. One common event will be the merger or the acquisition. One example will be United Airlines. A few years ago, United Airlines and Continental Airlines merged, and they have rebranded themselves as just United. Legal issue will be another reasoning. This usually is a trademark issue. One good example is Victoria's Secret. Victoria's Secret many years ago had a lawsuit with a small company called Victor's Secret. Now, obviously, the name Victor's Secret is very closely tied to Victoria's Secret, and they went into a legal battle with the small company. And this is a really interesting case because this case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Eventually, Victor's Secret had to rebrand itself. They changed their name to Victor's Little Secret. But that really didn't satisfy Victoria's Secret. They wanted the company to change the name completely. They didn't like that it started with the name Victor. So eventually that company had to rebrand itself, and currently they call themselves Kathy's Little Secret. So a complete new change and a rebranding effort on their part. The third reasoning will be the competitive influence. Sometimes a competitor's action can cause a rebrand. One example will be Microsoft and Apple. And the fourth reasoning will be the negative publicity. Remember Andersen Consulting? Now, Andersen Consulting was closely tied with Enron. Obviously, Enron has collapsed, and once that occurred, Andersen Consulting had to quickly rebrand itself, and currently they are called Accenture. So let's go into some of the case studies. I have 3 case studies today. The first one is United Way. Now, United Way, a little bit of a background about this organization. They are a nonprofit organization, and they have about 1,200 community-based independent organizations. United Way identifies and resolves issues in the community, as well as they make changes by partnering with churches, schools, government agencies, businesses, and neighborhood associations. Until now, United Way's main focus was on fundraising, and fundraising through each of their 1,200 community-based independent organizations. Today, their focus is being on a community impact leader. This logo was designed by a very famous designer called Solbass. Solbass has a pretty nice portfolio. He was responsible in designing a lot of different logos, including the United logo. He designed the Avery logo, also the Kleenex logo, Minolta, and many, many more. United Way was one of the logos that he created back in the early 70s. So this was 1972. He revealed this logo during a conference, a United Way Leaders Conference, and his logo was designed to convey United Way as a contemporary organization which is sensitive to the changing needs of the society. He used 3 important elements in his logo: the rainbow, the person, and the helping hand. The rainbow represents human diversity. It also represents harmony and the unity of purpose. The person symbolizes mankind, and it is also cradled by the helping hand, and it shows that all people are uplifted by United Way. And lastly, the helping hand symbolizes the services and the programs supported by United Way. But over time, the issue with United Way was that the logo compliance eroded. The 1,200 independent-run organizations took the logo and changed it by adding different elements into the logo. You will see at the bottom right corner that they screwed the logo a little bit. They even placed the logo on top of a state, right? So they completely changed the logo, and it was an issue with United Way. And one of the issue also was because the original logo that Solbas created required a 4-color reproduction, which was very unaffordable for some of these organizations. So by 2003, only about 11% of the chapters were using the approved version of the logo.
Hi, Lily. This is Ann Yoders. I'm the Director of Insight. So sorry for the technical challenges earlier in the session. Just wanted to chime in terms of the chapters with the United Way. This is an area that's fairly common with associations that associations face in their own work, as many associations have state and regional chapters that they work with. So United Way is a great example of an organization that had to work with the chapters to create kind of a unified look and feel and consistency across branding. Lily, are there any best practices in terms of rules in terms of working with chapters? Do you have you had experience in terms of how to approach that with organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. Once a rebranding is completed, usually the best practice is to come up with a branding guideline. That branding guideline will specify the way the logos should be used. It will talk about the different imagery that should be used with the logo, the colors that will be used with the logo, and also the fonts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and from our experience, it's a fairly significant rollout process because you do want consistency across all chapters, but you also want them to have some degree of their own personalization. So you want the consistency, but you also want to allow chapters to also sort of stretch their legs as well. So it takes a bit of time to do that, to roll that out to all the chapters and to navigate those waters. But thanks for highlighting that, as that is a common thing that associations face with branding. I'll let you continue on to the case study.
Okay. So here you see the before and after of the United Way logo. On the left is the logo designed by Solbas, and on the right is the new and improved logo. This new logo was designed by a firm called Rebrand. This logo is a much simpler version of what Solbas has designed about 30 years ago. This logo actually was launched in 2004. So the new symbol is now inside a rectangular shape, and this is to discourage the use of the icon by itself. The new logo symbol is much bolder, it's cleaner, and it really keeps the spirit and integrity of the original brand. There were some changes made to the illustration. The rainbow has been trimmed down to 3 lines instead of 4. The person and the hand has been redrawn. The hand is now much friendlier and humanized with less angular form. So after the logo was launched in 2004, the vision and ideal of the original logo, which were the attributes that ultimately drove United Way, are still standing. So here is a screenshot of the website for United Way. And as you can see, the branding has really, not only on the logo you see the branding, but they have also took that branding and applied it to their website design. You'll see that the colors are used consistently throughout the website. The logo is placed prominently on the top left corner. Now there are 3 call to actions that are very prominent on the website. As a user, you know that you're able to give, you're able to advocate, and you're able to volunteer. So the call to action on a website design is extremely important. So let's go on to our second case study.
And feel free to keep getting the questions in. As we go through this, we will be answering more questions.
This is Girl Scouts of America. Girl Scouts of America, this is also a nonprofit organization. There are over 3 million members across the country, and they are the largest organization for young women. As you may know, they empower girls in the United States and around the world through activities such as camping, through community service. They also do things such as learning first aid and earning badges by acquiring practical skills. As part of a new strategic decision to better engage the girls, the organization decided to update their identity. This logo that you see on the right-hand side was also designed by Soul Bath in 1978. Here you see the before and after logo for Girl Scouts. On the left, the original logo by Soul Bath, and on the right, the new logo.
Hi, Lily. Could I just stop that right real quick on the sort of the before and after? One of the challenges with a lot of organizations is that as they move forward, they look to modernize the brand, and this is a great example, and Lily will get into the case study in a little bit more detail here in a minute, but wanted to show the before and after. And then I did see a question from a participant, Maria, who said, she asked, what are the challenges in rebranding, especially with organizations that have been around for some time, like the Girl Scouts of America and the United Way, where you have that rich history, but you really need to modernize your look to appeal to a new demographic, perhaps?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And this is an issue that, a lot of organizations faces, especially organizations that have been around for a while. While rebranding and changing your identity is a good idea, it's always very difficult to do because you have to make sure that your internal audience and your external audience are understandable with the new change. So before you do any kind of rebranding process, you have to make sure that you have your mission statement. You have to get internal buy-ins for the new identity design, and you have to decide if you want to do a logo refresh, like the one you see for Girl Scouts of America. It's not a huge departure from the old logo, or if you want to do a complete new logo that does not look anything like its original logo. So that's an issue that we'll have to talk internally.
And then we have another question about the United Way logo. How did United Way chapters adapt to the new logo?
Oh, wonderful. That's a great question. So on the branding guideline, United Way has a sample of how the different chapters should look, would use the logo. So on this particular branding page, they will have the rectangular United Way logo, and below the logo will be the name of the chapter. So that's the way how each of the chapters would use that particular logo.
Lily, one last question from Janet. How long does a rebranding effort like this take? Is there a for those organizations that are considering a rebranding effort, how long should they allow to go through that full process?
So there is no correct answer to that. A rebranding effort actually is a huge task. Rebranding is not only about changing the colors or the shapes or the symbols on the logo, but really looking into the organization's mission statement, the strategy, and the approach. So a rebranding can take anywhere up to 4 months to a year, and some organizations even take more than a year.
Okay, thank you.
And then we have one question actually about the Girl Scouts logo from Fran. The question is, what is your opinion about changing from cap to lowercase, seeming that you are making the organization of women less important?
Oh, good question. So why don't we look at the next slide, Kazan? All right, so this slide answers a little bit about the case. So the font that's used on the new logo is the Avenir font. It's a modern font. And the designers, the people who designed this, is from a company called the Original Champions of Design. Now, the reasoning why they chose lowercase is because they wanted to make the words more approachable. You see throughout the different collaterals for Girl Scouts of America that everything is, in terms of the logo, everything is lowercase. They have not used this across the collaterals in terms of having, for example, on the website, headings being lowercase. They don't do that. It's only shown. So here we see the new logo on the right-hand side. And so let's also take a look at how the designers changed the logo mark. So there are 5 different things that they did to the logo mark. They are notable but subtle changes. So the first thing I want to point out is that they changed the hairstyle. So on the right-hand side, you can see that they have added bangs to the new logo symbol. The second thing that they did was they made the nose perkier. This is to make the girl a little bit more youthful. So if you see very closely from the left to the right, you see that the nose on the right-hand side is much perkier. They also redrew the shape of the lips. They added some tension to the lips to bring the girls alive. The fourth thing that they did was they simplified the neckline. On the left-hand side, you see a little bit of a curve on the neckline, and on the right-hand side, you see that they took the curve out, and it makes the mark much stronger. And lastly, what they did was they redrew the whole outer shape of the pointed trefoil, and this pretty much follows the shape of the shortbread cookie that they found. Here is an example of their current homepage design. It's very different. It's not to Association's typical web homepage design. They use the trefoil shape as the main graphical element on their homepage. Their call to actions are pretty clear. There are 2 things the user can do immediately. They can join today, or they can find information about volunteering.
Great. And before we go on to the next case study, we had a very good question from Corinne. How do you suggest explaining the benefits of refreshing or rebranding to older folks associated with the organization, nonprofit boards who are afraid of any change?
Wow, so that is a great question. Now, a rebranding occurs usually because there is some sort of a strategy change, not only just the visual look. So if your organization is going through a change in terms of maybe they're changing focus from one issue to another issue, or they are expanding their focus, that will be a great time to change the visual logo design.
And Corinne, we also have a white paper that we just wrote, and actually it will be in the follow-up email about the impact of rebranding, and it gives you some good tips to be able to maybe move that, cause that change and move an organization forward. So at the end of the webinar, you can email me and I will send you that white paper. Okay, so we'll move on to case study 3.
All right, perfect. So this is case study 3, Starbucks. Obviously a brand that most everybody recognizes. Starbucks, the world's largest coffee house chain. Their total assets are over $10 billion. They are a very profitable company, founded in the early 70s in Seattle. And what's noted here is that they have over 20,000 stores in 62 countries. This logo that you see here on the right-hand side went through various changes. This is not the original logo, but this logo was designed by Terry Heckler from Heckler Associates. Heckler Associates, they are also responsible for redesigning logos such as the Panera Bread brand, the Cinnabon brand, and the New Balance brand. Here is the before and after version of the Starbucks logo. The logo on the left was designed a little bit over 20 years ago. This new logo was rolled out and unveiled in 2011 with their 40th anniversary. This is a logo that really went through many different changes. The current logo they're making a very bold statement. What they did was they stripped out their company name from their logo. As you can see, this is their company logo. It's just a round circle with the image of the siren, which is the mermaid in the middle, and the mermaid is the focus of their logo. And this was a huge deal. Other companies that have done this are companies such as Nike, Apple, and Target. Those are the other companies also who don't have their company name anywhere near the company logo.
And Lily, we have a question here from Mark. What about trademark issues? Do you maintain the old one too? Trademark.
That is a great question, and actually I am not too sure about that answer, and that's definitely something that we can, maybe come back and answer your question. So if you can leave your email with Kazan.
Yeah, Mark, I will definitely get back to you with an answer for that. Good question.
All right, so this Starbucks logo, as you can see, focuses on the mermaid or the siren. They have enhanced her in subtle ways. They redrew her hair to make it much smoother. They refined her facial curve, and they also weighted the scales, also bring focus to her face. Now, this rebranding effort obviously was a huge deal, not just because of the change itself, but because what is represented logistically. As I mentioned before, there are over 20,000 stores around the world, and this meant that updating with this new look meant that all these stores have to, spend a lot of money. So what Starbucks did was they allowed that these stores made these phased changes through this logo. They allowed the stores to pretty much, use up their old branding, for example, the coffee mug, any kind of branding that had an old logo. They phased it out slowly, and they allowed the new stores to just bring in the logo as soon as they, finish selling all of the other products with the old brand.
And we have another question, Lily. Please explain the difference between a registered mark and a trademark.
That is a good question. I have no idea what the difference is.
It's a good
Let's
question.
loop it back.
And we will get you on that one.
Back to that. You bet. I have a question from Jill, which is actually a really good question, and it really gets in terms of knowing customers and how customers may change over time. So what happens when a certain approach to the designing of the brand is no longer relevant in terms of a customer segment? So your customers have perhaps changed, or the demographics, the type of customer you're trying to appeal to has changed. Would you go full just to reinvent the brand in its entirety, or would you, for example, the Starbucks is sort of an evolution of the brand, but what happens when really a business model changes?
Well, when a business model changes, that means, your audience changes. When your audience changes, you always want to appeal to your main audience. And if your logo or your branding appeals to an older previous audience, then definitely, it's a time for the organization to rebrand. Now, would you want a complete refresh or a complete change? That really depends on your audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agree. And another good question from Bill. Does the brand tell the wrong story? What happens when a brand tells the wrong story? What's interesting about this is that kind of gets into the strategic communications as well. But this, I would imagine, Lily, this really gets at the branding process and the various steps you go through in that process, including really coming to know who your customers are and how they may have changed over time, and if your brand is still relevant. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's completely accurate. And actually, a few minutes later, maybe about 3 or 4 slides into after the Starbucks, I want to show you what happens when a brand does not design for their audience. So I may be able to answer that question in a few minutes.
Okay.
Right. We just have actually one of our attendees answered a question for us. Thank you, Marissa, for that. The difference between a registered and a trademark is a registered mark needs to be applied for with the U.S. government versus a company can simply claim a trademark without filing any paperwork. So thank you for that.
Oh, interesting. Thank you.
You're teaching us something new today.
Yeah, absolutely. You learn something new every single day.
Exactly.
All right, so this is a screenshot of the Starbucks homepage design. As you can see, the logo on the top left. It's a new logo, and if you really see it closely, you really don't see the word Starbucks anywhere on this design except on that black bar. It says My Starbucks Rewards. That's also true when you go to any Starbucks store. The logo is usually by itself. You don't see the word Starbucks. That doesn't mean that you won't see the word Starbucks anywhere else. It's just not near the logo. All right, so let's talk best practices. And the best way to talk best practices, I think, to really talk about one of the biggest catastrophes in history in terms of rebranding. We call this the Gap Gate. So not many people really know that Gap went through a rebranding. This took place in 2010 around the Christmas. So what happened was that Gap very secretly and quietly changed the logo on their website. So as you can see on the right-hand side, that is the after. So on the left is the before, it's their old original logo. So on the right-hand side, you see that the logo is on a white background with a single word Gap in bold. The font, any of you who are design geeks out there, this is Helvetica bold. And the other element that is in the new logo is that blue gradient box right behind the letter P. So what happened was that the new logo was a drastic change, and consumers got really confused, right? Just imagine you on the website, on the Gap website one day, and the following day you're on the same website, but the whole branding changes. And you're just surprised because you think that, maybe there's some sort of a scam or, phishing going on because Gap didn't make any announcement. They just changed the logo without any, press releases or anything. So on the left-hand side, this old logo, consumers associated this logo with Christmas shopping bags, with faded denims, and low price, quality, casual wear. But the new logo on the right-hand side seemed very cheap, generic, and tacky. Actually, Gap received many comments and complaints about this new logo. And they did respond. They initially responded positively. That thank you for all your comments. We love the logo. We decided that we wanted to update our logo to appeal to our new audiences. But they kept on receiving all these comments about the new logo. So Gap decided on a large crowdsourcing experiment to help them reinvent a new logo. So basically, they created a contest and invited the public to submit logos, which pretty much did not go too well among the design industry. Designers did not like this idea at all. So after this, they did not receive any, they received a lot of logos, but not logos that they thought were good enough for them to use. And so Gap, again, quietly changed the logo back to its original logo. So this whole event took place within about a week. So Gap quietly put out the new logo and then quietly decided to take it down and replace it back to their original logo. So in case of Gap, what went wrong? So the silent switch and the logo contest did not, do too well. Let's go to our second company that rebranding, which failed. This is Tropicana. So this rebranding endeavor actually caused Tropicana sales to drop 20% in 1 month. This was a huge, huge drop. 20% meant about $35 million. Now, Tropicana, what they did was, one day they decided that they wanted to change their packaging. On the new packaging on the right-hand side, you see that they feature an image of a glass of orange juice transposed over a white background. At the top of the carton was the text, "Squeezed from fresh oranges." And, actually consumers were really confused because the packaging on the right was such a huge departure from their old packaging. It almost looked like a generic orange juice brand. So what was the biggest mistake? The biggest mistake in this case was that the Tropicana company did not really consider their users, their audience.
Lily, we have a question. So would you say that it is when you're looking at a rebrand, it is a good idea to do a small focus group before you do a hard launch to the whole public?
Yeah, absolutely. User testing is one of the best tools in terms of rebranding. You have to test your logo design with your internal audience and some selected external audience, absolutely. All right, so just a few points on best practices on reinvention. Understand why you are rebranding. You have to target your audience, and you have to make sure how this rebranding will affect your organization. And when you do a rebranding, make sure that you build upon the brand, build it upon the unique history and distinction of your organization. You need to consult your audience. Get your external stakeholders involved. User testing is really important, like I mentioned. Make sure you do some user testing with your internal and external stakeholders. You always need to make sure to reconnect your mission with the visual identity. You need to connect your mission and to make or to create a cohesive picture of what it does as an organization. And lastly, you have to perfect your timing, right? You need to create and roll out a plan and tie the big reveal to some sort of an anniversary, like what Starbucks did, or maybe reveal it in a conference, or maybe reveal it on the new website redesign.
Right, and we are going to take a couple more questions here before the last 3 minutes that we have left. And while those questions come in, if you would like to receive our white paper on future-ready rebranding, just email me. But like I said, there will also be a link to it in the follow-up email. And please visit our blog. We try and blog as often and as we try and put blog posts out there that are relevant to our audience and that provide resources for you guys to be able to make this whole experience as simple as possible. We had a question here from Lena about the Tropicana orange juice rebrand. She said maybe Tropicana was trying to get market share back from the store brand purchases. That could have been one of their goals, but clearly that failed.
It failed because their sales dropped 20%. Their audience was really used to seeing that symbol of the orange with the striped red and white straw that goes in the orange. And by taking that out, it just felt like they were a generic brand. And, consumers thought that not only did the outer packaging change, but maybe the inside orange juice would change too. So they didn't want to spend premium money because, Tropicana orange juice are a little bit more expensive than a generic brand. They didn't want to spend that extra, a few cents and pay for something that they thought that maybe the taste would be a generic orange juice taste.
Right, and that's a good example of how the face of rebranding is the phase.
Yeah.
Because if it looks cheap, people are going to assume it is cheap.
Exactly.
Anne, do you have anything to add before we finish up?
Yeah, I have a question from Alex, who asked around communicating your new brand internally, which I thought was an interesting question. So it's just not introducing a new brand externally to your customers or to your members, but it's also how do you communicate that internally to staff? Because as was mentioned earlier, usually a rebranding effort usually comes out of sort of revisiting organizational strategy. So there's some sort of internal rolling out of the new brand and what that means. Lily, have you had any experience with that or any comments to that? I thought that was a really interesting question.
Yeah, that is an interesting question. So, actually communicating a rebranding effort internally can be really difficult, right? Because a lot of, your internal audience, it could be, the board of directors or whoever they are that are so, they love their branding and they don't see the need for rebranding. So in terms of changing rebranding and communicating that to the internal audience, user testing is always the best way to go. Do your user testing to external audience and report back, what the results were from the user testing. If the users felt that it was time for a rebrand, then that's a really good indication and a way for, you to convince your internal audience that the rebranding should occur.
Great.
Excellent.
And one final question from Karine. What is your opinion about logo offshoots aimed at different demographics, kids, young professionals, etc., keeping with the spirit of the original but creating sub-logos?
Good question. We have not done a logo like that, having sub-logos. But if the sub-logos are completely different, maybe that's something to think about. But there are a lot of companies that are very big, and they do have sub-logos. As long as there is something that maybe unifies those sub-logos in terms of maybe using the same font or maybe using a similar color palette or having some sort of a highlight color that's consistent throughout the brand, I think that will work very well.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and we will be answering these questions in our follow-up email as well. And if you have any questions after this webinar that you think of and the webinar is over, please feel free to email me, and we will get back to you. Great. Thank you so much, and have a great day. Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Lily.